Good evening and welcome to a regular City Council meeting for the Oak Harbor City Council. This evening is March 6th and it is 6 p.m. I'd like to call that meeting to order. We'll start our meeting with a invocation this evening led by Reverend Rilla Barrett, St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, and we invite you to stand and join us for that invocation, followed by a Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead.
Please pray with me. Holy One, we give you thanks for the many blessings of this day, for the beauty of the place where we live, for the citizens of this and our neighboring communities, for our families and friends, for the opportunity to serve you, and for the gift of your love. We recognize these blessings, and we recognize the challenges that we face in meeting the needs of our community, for the hungry, the homeless, the marginalized, for Navy families when deployment is in action, for families without income. We ask you for your guidance, O God. Show us how we can serve you best in this community by serving our fellow citizens and by using our resources in the best way. Give us wisdom, courage, hope, and a vision of how you would have us serve your people. Speak to us, Lord, and give us ears to hear you. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Barrett. Please join me in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, it looks like we have a full council here tonight. So I'd like to move on to the approval of the agenda. Thank you. Yes.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Motion by Servadius and second by Almberg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Number 2, presentations. We have a couple of community presentations tonight, and I think first on our agenda is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Island County annual presentation, and I believe I see the Executive Director, Julie Langrock. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks for having us here. And we're here for an annual kind of report on our program, and just to thank you for your continued support. I wanted to introduce staff of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Island County. I have Anita Joseph, Samantha Lau, and Kathy Kaltenbach here with me tonight. And I'm going to keep my comments really brief because we've brought a video. We feel like this is the best way to kind of give you a program update, is to let you hear from the littles and bigs that are in our program. So when you watch the video, these are actual matches that take place in Oak Harbor and Coopville. So I wanted... You have a community report, and I want to give special thanks to, this was a Sammy project. We used to do these, and they kind of went by the wayside. We've brought them back this year, and I think you'll find them useful as far as giving some demographics. One of the ones I noted, it's always kind of good to keep track of year to year. The percentage this year of children that we serve that are coming from non-two-parent homes, that rose, it's up 5% from last year. So we're at 64% of the children in our program do not live in two-parent homes. I also wanted to highlight a program that I think you guys should take special recognition for, Bigs with Badges. And I want to thank Chief Dresker. He was instrumental in making it happen. We kind of went to him with an idea of implementing this in our community. It's a national program that pairs our littles, who are the youth in our programs, with police officers. And the goal is just to bridge the gap of those two communities. So thank you. We have Oak Harbor Police Department as our bigs. And as you can imagine, they have very busy day-to-day schedules. They're taking the time to go to Oak Harbor schools once a week and meet with their little at their home schools. So far, the comments that we're getting from the little's parents, they're seeing big improvements. I was asking around with staff, what are you seeing? One comment was one of the littles is wearing a police badge every day and now wants to be a police officer. So that's a plus. This was my side note too. I checked in, we have an upcoming match activity to Chuck E. Cheese. And I think it's funny that both of your Oak Harbor Police Department bigs have signed up for that activity with their littles. So I would say that's going above and beyond their call of duty, so.
I told them they couldn't accept gratuities, no eating pizza.
Okay, we'll monitor that. So I'm just gonna, I think at this time we'll show the video. So thanks again.
We've rode bikes, we've played Pokemon Go, we've played Star Wars chess, played with this dog, we've done a lot.
I played hide and seek with her last year almost every time, and towards the end of the year we played with the chickens. When we first met, we went out to Dairy Queen and got ice cream, and we went to the same park twice. We went to Spirit Halloween.
We've done a lot of activities together. We like to draw, we like to watch anime together. It's really fun actually.
We play lots of games when we can. We do homework, and she really helps me. She's a really just helpful person. Awesome, nice, very, very caring.
She listens to what you say, and she plays games. They're fun, tasty.
Tasty?
He every time we see each other, at first we go to Hoagie Coffee.
So you do something tasty and fun.
She's very nice and kind and caring and very sweet. And she doesn't let you down and stuff. She keeps her promises and secrets.
I describe her as kind and generous and really upbeat. She's really intelligent and just a person that you want to spend time with. I don't know. That's hard because people move away, but I'm hoping if he moves away or I move away, we can still stay in touch.
Forever. When we're old, we'll call each other. Till I move out.
Well, she wrote a note to me, and I'm thinking that we'll be friends forever.
I think for probably the rest of our school careers together, maybe even after that, I think we are just a really good pair together. It was hard when Mom changed jobs a lot, but it was hard, but Clemente helped me through it.
She gave me someone that actually plays with me, like a friend, because I don't get sleepovers or play dates with any of my friends. I don't get hounded all the time from my mom. Why are you a mom?
I am a mom.
She's actually been a great role model for me on this world.
She's really impacted my life. She has kind of cheered me up on sad days, and she's helped me catch up with homework, and she's just always there, and she always impacts my life in the best way possible. That you're awesome, and that it's super fun to hang out with him.
I like that you play games with me.
Okay, and what does she mean to you?
The world. That is fun and delicious. And basically everything I said last time.
The day that she dies, she won't be alone on that. Because I will always have her in my heart.
I just want to say thank you, Kenzie. You are a humongous influence in my life, and you helped me make a lot of progress and develop, and you are just an amazing person.
That's awesome.
How did that make you feel?
I feel emotional. It's very encouraging that I'm helping out his life in a way that he has someone who he can come up to and feel safe and have fun with when everything around him is so busy, and it's encouraging, and I'm really glad I'm his brother.
I feel like really emotional, like I feel like I'm gonna cry. That, I don't know, that like boosted my confidence a lot. Like for me, like I feel like she's made a big difference in my life.
Enjoy playing with him. I enjoy just having fun. We have a lot of fun on different playgrounds and we goof around.
Zoe is amazing.
That's so sweet and it's very meaningful. I joined this program because I wanted to get, experience and be able to help someone out. So it really means a lot that I have been able to do that.
Okay.
Well, I can see that in watching the staff, and I can see that this makes a difference. What you do makes a difference to not only the littles, also the bigs, and to the staff. We can't thank you enough for what you do, and really appreciate it. So keep it up, and I hope the program grows. The council? Yes, Councilor Heisen.
Julie, can you tell us how many littles are on your wait list right now? In case there are bigs who want to volunteer.
Right now, I think the latest we saw was about 38, which is actually a little bit down. We've kind of had a good influx of volunteers coming in, which is nice. We can always use volunteers, so yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is under Community Presentations, Planning Commission 2017 Annual Report to City Council. Development Services Director Steve Powers.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is one of the true pleasures of my job here, is to just spend a couple minutes to tell you about the Planning Commission. I know you're very familiar with them because you appoint them. But what you might not always be able to keep in mind is how hard they work on behalf of you and the community. And so, as been our habit for the last several years, we have an annual report that really just quickly outlines for you what the Planning Commission did the last year. But before I go any further, I do want to acknowledge that we have one of our current Planning Commissioners in the room, Hal Hovey. And we also have sort of a unique situation. We have a former Planning Commissioner who hopes to become a current Planning Commissioner on a later agenda item this evening. So with those semi-introductions out of the way, your 2017 Planning Commission members are shown there on the screen. The ones in the green are still with us. The ones with their names highlighted in white had to move on to other life duties, but we certainly appreciate the contribution that each and every one of them has made to the projects which have come forward in 2017. There is in your agenda packet, as you know, a written report that provides you detailed information on each of the major projects that they tackled for you, as well as a summary of their actual actions on those items. So I'm just going to really hit the high points this evening. And just by the breadth and the variety in these projects, you can see that they tackle a lot of subjects. CWPP, for those who aren't up on their planning acronyms, are countywide planning policies. Man, that sounds boring, but it is an incredibly important document to have into place. It helps us figure out how we're going to coordinate with Island County on planning matters of regional importance. Transportation Improvement Program, kind of self-explanatory, but that's our 6-year roadmap, if you'll pardon the poor pun, in terms of how we tackle transportation projects. Capital Improvements Plan covers transportation, but of course then all of our other utilities, water, sewer, storm drains, parks, marina, general facilities. They have a strong hand in shaping what our public investments are going to be for the next 6 years. And last but not least, certainly, is the comprehensive plan, which is our blueprint for the future. Lots of code amendments, which is their other primary responsibility. There's about 4 or 5 of them up there, I think, on the screen for you. We can see that things such as changing our processes to make rezoning faster and more efficient for our property owners and our community members. Kind of an interesting one, dealing with variances and how do we protect our Gary oak trees even more than what we were prior to that. Probably the single biggest one up there in terms of things that our public would notice are the temporary and special signs. Council recalls that was the byproduct of a rather interesting U.S. Supreme Court decision. Your Planning Commission helped us wade through a whole host of issues so that we could have a code which is not only consistent with the ruling from the highest court in the land, but also something that we can use here in our community, and it's fairly easy to understand. We're still working on the critical areas code, but the Planning Commission has done their part. And then finally, they helped amend the code so that we could provide a little flexibility in who gets to be a Planning Commission member. Lest we think that we're going to let them rest on their laurels from 2017, 2018 has another major work program lined out for them as well. As you know, we do the comprehensive plan every year. We're finishing up our work on the Parks and Recreation Plan, Historic Preservation Ordinance. We're working on that. New standards or enhanced standards to protect Gary oak trees, something that you'll hear about later this evening, small cell deployment. And then probably one of the ones which will get the most public attention, and I'm sure it already has the council's attention, is that last bar up there, which is the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations. And you'll notice that we have all of the months except for January highlighted because we expect that we'll be working the majority of the year and trying to bring forward even just a handful of those recommendations to the City Council. This is just what we can foresee right now. There will be other topics that they tackle as well. And finally, but certainly not my last sort of sentiment, is that we would really like from the staff perspective to thank the Planning Commission for all of their service to the community and to thank them for the work that they do on your behalf. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or maybe Mr. Hovey might have the opportunity to answer any questions if the council has any. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Council? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Is that really your entire presentation?
It is.
Amazing. I would too just like to say thank you. We have a lot of boards and commissions, and this is one that does a lot of heavy lifting for the council. You guys and gals sort through a lot of information. You come from all walks of life, different backgrounds. You get a lot of community input, and I think that adds up to making some great recommendations before it comes to us. So thank you, Hal, Jess, soon to come, and the others that aren't here.
Thank you, Mr. Servadius.
Yes. My sentiments exactly. I know, especially as serving on council, it was always more comfortable to be able to come behind something that the Planning Commission had already spent a lot of time on, and then read some of the comments and dialogue. I think he hit it on the head. A lot of heavy lifting there. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. So we will move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is citizen comment period. At this time, citizens may comment on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. To ensure comments are recorded properly, please state your name clearly into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. Comments regarding candidates or ballot measures are not allowed under state law. Individuals participating in public comment are asked to refrain from speaking on those topics during the comment period. Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'm Mike Raddick. I'm a casual observer of city government, and I just came for one reason tonight, and that is to say thank you to Mr. Merriman for the years of service that he's done in this town. I don't know the man other than just by sight. I've watched him on TV many times. I've always admired the way he handled himself. I always felt that he had the best interests of this city at heart, and I understand the circumstances in which he's leaving, but I thought that it was appropriate for one person, one citizen, to stand and applaud him for his attention and love of the city. So,
Thank you, Mike. You bet. And I see that we have Mike Thielen with us again tonight. Mike, wearing the green.
Mr. Mayor and council members, on behalf of the Irish Wildlife Society, partially represented here in green, we would like to formally follow up the written invitations to all of you to participate in the upcoming St. Patrick's Day Parade on Saturday, March 17th at 1 o'clock. We'll be staging at 12:30, and we'd love to have you all present. We have a special presentation, however, right now, and that would be for Lily, our youngest leprechaun, to make a presentation of a very special rock to our mayor. This is the great-granddaughter of one of the former Grand Marshals, the McWilliams family. So we just want to thank you for the support that you've given us, the permitting process, all the way the city staff has cooperated in barricading and making this parade possible in its 45th year. So thank you very much.
Happy St. Patty's Day. Thanks, Lily, and thank you to the Irish Wildlife Society.
There's a dinner that immediately follows the parade at the American Legion just up the street, so you're all invited to that too.
Thank you, Lily. I would like to thank Lily too. I probably look older. And you're right.
There you go. Okay, thanks again. Citizen comment period. We still have, yes, Hal, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Severance, members of the City Council. My name's Hal Hovey. I'm a resident of Oak Harbor. I've got a few things I'd like to talk about tonight. First is I am a member of the Planning Commission. We still have 2 openings, even after we get our new appointee, hopefully tonight. So anybody out there watching who was impressed by that presentation, please join us. Second thing I'd like to talk about is Windjammer Park. I wasn't originally expecting to talk about this tonight, but after sitting through the workshop yesterday, which was mainly in discussion about the wastewater treatment plant, there was some periphery discussion about the Windjammer Park, and I'm a little concerned about the funding. We've been hearing for months that funding sources are being pursued, I think is the term that has been used over and over and over and over again. And then we hear yesterday afternoon that, we missed the window and we're too early for the next window for most of the development of the park that we had been expecting. I thought the whole point of us doing the Windjammer integration plan and doing the park design was so that we would be able to have a plan that we could go in search of grants and get in on the cycle in order to have the park done within a year after the plant was done. Not the entire park, but at least the phase 1 that was planned. And, I remember coming up here right after we finished the Windjammer Park integration plan, which I was a member of and Jess was a member of, and expressing my concern that we were going to end up with a giant mud hole. And I am even more concerned that that may be the outcome now after hearing yesterday's presentation than I was a year ago, because a year ago we were very optimistic. I know that there's been some concern in the City Council and the Mayor's office about the lack of communication about what's been happening, and I share that concern as a member of the public that, I'm not going to say that we were having smoke blown, but, there was a very optimistic approach to what's happening, and then suddenly yesterday afternoon, we hear that, oh, we don't have any funding sources for the rest of the park. I'm concerned. Why have we not been hearing, we missed the window, we're too early for the next window? Why have we not been hearing that? That's something that setting expectations is important for the public. And our expectations have been set very high, and it doesn't look like we're going to get there, so I'm concerned. The last thing I'd like to mention is the housing situation. As of 5:40 this afternoon, we had 12 single-family detached houses for sale on Whidbey Island north of Libby Road, single-family detached, under $300,000. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Citizen comment. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 4 is the consent agenda. And if somebody would like to discuss one of those, now would be the time to do that. Otherwise, they will be approved as presented. Oh, Councilor Wassner.
Just before we approve it, I'd like to let everyone know that Jess Walker-Weiss, who hopefully we're just about to appoint to the Planning Commission, is here. So welcome, Jess. Thanks for being here, and thank you for your service.
I certainly agree with that. Anyone else? Okay, they will be approved as presented, and Jess, congratulations. Welcome back. Very excited to have you back. Okay, item number 5, mayor and council member comments. I have a couple of things, actually. I attended a mayor's exchange in Olympia on February 21st for the day. It was nice to be able to spend time with about, oh gosh, I don't know, there could have been 75 to 100 mayors there from a lot of other cities, and it's really interesting to be able to communicate directly with them about their successes and their concerns and their just a lot of discussion. We also heard from directly from the governor. Governor Jay Inslee came and spent a half an hour with us. It was one of the mayors from Eastern Washington said that afterwards he said, I was prepared not to give him any time to listen, and he said I was kind of impressed after I listened to him. So the governor did do a nice job, actually, of talking to us and sharing his priorities and how he intends to work closer with cities as time goes on. So it was a great day, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I know that I missed the last council meeting because of that, and I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem stepping in, and thanks for that opportunity. Also had an opportunity to go to Skagit Valley College and view the Serendipity Gateway Lane. Actually, the gateway has been welded by the welding class at Skagit Valley College, and it has been, I think, powder coated just recently in Mount Vernon, and that is scheduled to come to Oak Harbor before long and be put in place on Pioneer Way. But the impressive thing was to meet most of the people that have been working on that gateway and to see it. I mean, it's beautiful. But there were 4 people involved in that welding class from Oak Harbor. The club secretary, as a matter of fact, Jessica Holbrook was there. Raymond Knight, Nathan Morse, and Nicholas Blodgett were all there and they're all from Oak Harbor. And they've all worked on that gateway. So I think when you see it, you're going to be impressed. It was a fun time for me to be able to not only see it ahead of time, but to talk to the people involved. And I think we'll have a ceremony when we bring it over here and put it in place. So you'll all be invited to that for sure. And my last item is, I think that we have one of our staff members here who is celebrating a birthday today. I think our city attorney, Nikki Esparza, and we didn't sing to you at the staff today, and we probably won't during the council meeting tonight, but, you know, I'll leave that up to council. Happy birthday, Nikki. Yes. Okay, so council comments. Yes, Councilor Wassinger.
21, Nikki? That's what I thought. I'd like to let the community know Jess Walker-Weiss is here, and I'm glad she's here tonight because this Saturday night is the Miss Oak Harbor pageant. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a great event that Jess is the creator and visionary of, and you know, I got a little bit emotional with the Big Brothers Big Sisters presentation. I probably have mascara on my face from a few tears. Anything involving children, kids in this community is really special to me, important to me. I value everyone in our community who volunteers to make not just these little kids, but the high school kids, you know, feel like they have an opportunity to do something great and learn and succeed in life. And that is just one more. The Miss Oak Harbor pageant it's an amazing program. It sells out. It may be sold out. I may be saying this and you may not get to go, but I hope in the future you'll look forward to it. It's around this time every year. It's on Facebook and they have a website if you just search for Miss Oak Harbor pageant. I love volunteering for the event. It's really special to me. So thank you, Jess, for that. And also another great, there's some youth spring sports starting up. Little League is starting this next week, practices, and youth soccer I know is going to start up soon. So other great opportunities for kids. So be aware when you're out, they'll be practicing all over town. So be on the lookout for little kids after school running around and be safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Other council? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'm hoping that the council members will comb through their emails, anything from AWC, but they're really trying to keep you updated, and there are times where they do need to hear from you on certain bills that will affect our city or just you as a citizen. Anyone is welcome to go. It's Association of Washington Cities website, but they keep you up to date on what's happening and how the bills will affect the cities, when they will lose revenue, when it's unfunded mandate. There's some important issues, and there's only a few more days left for session, so it's going by very fast. This Friday, I will go to the Municipal Research Center's meeting on Friday, MRSC. There are the kind of the legal beagles that anyone in-state, out-of-state can call and ask questions about how our state operates, what are the rules, if I want to start a business here. If I think something is wrong in my workplace, you can call them up or email them and ask them questions, and they will do the research for you and get it back to you, and it's free of charge. And then next week, I am pleased to go with the mayor to represent us at the Pentagon and find out, talk over relationships and make sure we're doing all and they're doing all that they can to be good partners. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council. Yes, Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of soapbox things. I apologize in advance. We heard about the Planning Commission and Big Brothers Big Sisters earlier, and you know, I see a lot and I hear a lot of chatter about you know, what goes on at the city, mostly criticism, and my response to people is always get involved. There are no shortage of ways to get involved in the decision-making process. So we have boards and commissions. We have openings on several of those. You can volunteer in your community. You can go volunteer at the Haven. You can be a big brother or big sister. Literally, there are hundreds of ways you can get involved in your community, and so I hope that people who are concerned about this community will, you know, do that. I also am extremely dismayed at the recent decision in Olympia where state legislators voted to exempt themselves from the Public Records Act, or portions of it. I think I thought I was being punked when I read about that. I didn't think that was possible, because for years we have gone to Olympia and we have asked for some kind of protection against unreasonable requests. There are cities that have literally been bankrupted by unreasonable public record requests, and any appeal for relief or reasonable restrictions on that have gone ignored. We go to Olympia, we talk to Senator Bailey and Representative Hayes and Smith, and they smile and they nod and they agree and they sympathize. And with the exception of Norma Smith, they turn around and vote to exempt themselves, because the cost and the expense and the trouble would, paralyze their ability to do their job. So the fact that they're suddenly concerned about how onerous a burden this is on themselves and refuse to provide any relief to us is extremely disappointing to me. And I'll be letting them know that as well. I don't think there's any excuse for that. And I'm surprised at the AWC. I haven't seen anything from them on that particular subject. I've been looking for it, but I'd be interested, Ms. Munns, if you've heard anything from them on that, because they seem to have been silent on the issue. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council? Okay. Do we have, we don't have a clean water report tonight, and I don't think we have any other comments at this time, right? Okay. Okay, we will move to the, we have no public hearings or meetings, but we do have a couple of ordinances and resolutions to consider, or ordinances, I should say. Item number 7A is interim ordinance number 1830, small cell deployment permit process, and interim ordinance number 1831, small cell deployment development standards, and finally ordinance number 1832, small cell deployment definitions. And it looks like we've got our senior planner, Dennis Lefebvre. Dennis?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Since this is my first presentation this year, I'd like to welcome aboard the 2 new council members. Good to see you on the dais up there. This is a subsequent step to the presentation that was made by Steve Powers and Joe Stoll last November at your workshop regarding small cell deployment. This is taking it the next step further and actually presenting some ordinances to you this evening. Some of the key points I'd like to address tonight is kind of briefly discuss the background and identify some of the demand that has occurred. What has happened at the state legislature lately. Briefly overview the proposed interim ordinances that are in your packet. Describe the interim ordinance process, since it is a little unique. It's a little different than what we normally do as far as moving forward a code amendment. And then discuss next steps. As far as the demand is concerned, I don't think it's any mystery that we're all becoming more dependent on wireless devices. This graphic is from Verizon, and it shows that their annual growth is 57% for wireless devices and the capacity for their network. This next graphic is from Cisco, and it actually identifies between the years 2014 and 2018 an increase of 650% in their mobile data usage. And the next graphic is from AT&T, which indicates their network has increased more than 150,000% since 2007. We're all becoming more dependent on wireless devices. We've got to admit it, it's part of society. So what does this increased usage really mean? It means more of a demand on the infrastructure. And typically, carriers like to provide these macro towers, but for the propensity of usage that we are starting to see with our devices, these towers are really difficult and cumbersome to site. land use issues, particularly in residential neighborhoods, become increasingly difficult. So what is the technology moving towards? It's a small cell deployment. And before we get into too much detail, I'm not an expert in this subject. So if my terminology isn't really the proper terminology, please excuse me. But basically what the technology, is there a, yes, there is. On the screen on the left, the red folks basically indicate people who don't have service or the service is slow to them simply because there's only one of the cell site available. The graphic to the right, obviously they have another tall tower, but they also have one of the small cells which provides more actually pedestrian scale service to those folks who want to use their mobile device. Another graphic basically shows a macro site on top of a structure. Obviously, we don't have a structure that high. And I think as Joe indicated back in November, those are disrupted by geography or other structures. So the application, sorry, sorry, Nikki. The application of the small cells at the ground level provide the better service for pedestrians. Let me catch up with my notes here. So what are we exactly talking about? I'm sure most of you are aware of what we're looking at. Joe and Steve did a nice job back in November, but obviously we have the macro cells, which do get up to a range of 80 feet. In fact, I think we allow towers in the city of Oak Harbor over 100 feet. But what the small cells provide is the opportunity to create them at more of a pedestrian scale. There's the pedestrian. But also, you can also increase the propensity of the small cell locations. So what do these guys look like? Well, they can be put on any type of pole, metal or wood, as you can see here. And it's typically not that intrusive as far as the equipment that is needed for a small cell. But those poles are within the city public right-of-way, which gives us the opportunity to create legislation and regulations to monitor basically their location and what they do look like. And again, I'm going to get beyond my technology realm here, but basic components of a small cell, you have the antenna at the top, and then you have some mechanism that can relay that signal down to this termination box, and that can be in some type of power conduit. And on a wooden pole, there's a conduit that goes down here. Maybe on a metal pole, that wiring can be within the pole itself. And then you have a power disconnect at the bottom, which I would assume disconnects the power. But that's basically, in a nutshell, what the small cell is that we're looking at. And it does open up the capacity and availability for additional usage for your mobile devices. So what's happening at the state level? Oh, that's another example, I'm sorry. A visual example of one conversion of a pole to the utilization of that same pole for a small cell. And the equipment is located in the base. As you can tell, it's a little bit larger than the one on the left. And your antenna raises it up a little bit, but certainly it's not that obtrusive as far as I'm concerned. Last November, Joe and Steve mentioned that there was legislation that was being proposed and that was moving forward that would have preempted local authority by some of the regulations that they included in that proposed legislation. That did not pass. This year, there was actually a handful of bills that dealt with small cell technology, but only one was surviving up until this last week, and that was Senate Bill 5935. However, as of, I think, yesterday, the House Technology and Economic Development Committee removed the small cell sections from this bill. But in response from AWC, Association of Washington Cities, they recommend that communities that are moving forward with regulations and ordinances to allow the siting of these facilities to continue to move forward, eventually it's going to happen. We are going to see small cells, and it'd be nice to have regulations and design standards in place that we can deal with it properly. So what's the package before you tonight? As you're most aware, Oak Harbor became a member of a consortium with other Washington cities. We worked with Ogden, Murphy, and Wallace to actually prepare these ordinances that are in your packet tonight. They're consistent with the requirements at the federal level. They blended those in nicely with the existing ordinances that we already had in place regarding some other telecommunication issues. It also allowed us an opportunity to reflect some of our local requirements in these ordinances, which gave us deference over any state requirements that would have evolved through that legislation had it passed. So briefly, in your packet there are 3 ordinances. 2 of them are interim ordinances. One is a regular ordinance. The first is number 1830. And essentially what that does is it creates the process for us to site these small cells. And since they more than likely will be on power poles or some type of facility like that in our right-of-way, we have a linkage in that ordinance to our franchise agreement and our right-of-way use agreement. So there's a connection there. The small cell permit would be an administrative review, and we would bring that consistent with our requirements for timing in 19.29. If a carrier doesn't have a franchise agreement, they would be required to apply for a franchise agreement, and at the same time they could apply for locations of up to 20 small cells at the same time, and that's called a master permit. As I mentioned, this ordinance also establishes the permit timelines, links it with the federal guidelines. The shot clock issue, I think it's a 60-day window for that shot clock. And again, that's an interim ordinance. So keep that in mind. I'll explain that interim ordinance process in just a minute. Ordinance number 1831. That deals with a lot of the standards and the regulations, the heights and dimensions and the sizes of things that we would be looking at to site these small cells on poles within our right-of-way. It would address new poles, wood or non-wood poles, dimensional requirements, ground equipment. And I mentioned ground equipment only because there can be an ADA issue if it's not giving enough width on a sidewalk for a wheelchair passage. It also requires a concealment plan, and this is where we were able to add our local touch and influence into it. Concealment plan is basically what is the carrier's proposal for designing these so that they're more in character with their surroundings. We have chosen 3 distinct zones or districts that this concealment plan would be applicable to. The Central Business District, the Maritime District, which is basically the shoreline, and then our Scenic Byway, which is the Highway 20 corridor. So those areas, if there was a carrier that wished to site small cells, we would require them to go through this concealment process plan to let us know what they would be looking at, what they would look like once they were actually in place. The final ordinance, 1832, is simply a transfer of a couple of definitions. We noticed that they were not in a proper location, so this ordinance is actually moving those 2 definitions into another more logical location in our code. This does not need to take an interim process simply because we're not changing or adding or deleting any text. So process. We are guided by state statute, and obviously the interim zoning ordinances can be approved tonight by this body. It is required that after 60 days of approval tonight, if we should move in that direction, we would have to have a public hearing before this group again. Prior to that public hearing, Planning Commission recommendation would not be needed. However, the interim ordinances are effective for 6 months, and it would be our anticipation, looking at our proposed timeline here, that we would involve the Planning Commission in the review of these ordinances. Obviously, to meet that first 60 days, we would be looking at a public hearing before this group, probably the second meeting in April. We'd go through some refinements as necessary once we had a chance to make sure everything meshed and our applications were consistent. Bring that through the Planning Commission for their recommendation back to this body here. And to meet that 6 months, we would be looking at probably your first or second meeting in August of this year to bring these back and finalize them. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, before we do that, I'll ask if the public has got any questions. Anybody here? Any questions regarding the presentation? Okay, back to council. Councilor Wiesner.
Other than the changes we made to this ordinance and the design for the specific zones, like the CBD zone and stuff, this ordinance is, and I understand that all the cities around the state are kind of looking at this because we've been aware of this for a while. This ordinance is fairly canned, and are we expecting this to be adopted by most of the cities in the state?
I think that's a fair statement. Maybe I can ask Nikki that. She's had more communications as far as the consortium is concerned.
So these ordinances are based on a template that was created by OMW. I think there's 20 cities or so in the consortium right now, and so those cities will likely adopt something similar with local twists. These ordinances have been through the industry, which is what they call the telecommunications industry, and they have worked through a lot of issues, and everyone is, for the most part, comfortable with the language in these ordinances, and the industry is on notice that this is kind of where the cities are going. At this point, it's hard to say how many cities will actually adopt something similar. There are cities that already have things in place because a lot of the bigger cities like Bellevue and the east side cities, Seattle, Bellingham, things like that, they already have the carriers deployed in their cities. And so they have had to sort of reactively put in place these ordinances instead of proactively putting in place. So a lot of cities already have ordinances in place. I'd say there's at least 20 cities that are going to have ordinances that are similar because there are 20 or so members of the consortium.
Because obviously what I'm getting at is I want to make sure that we're protecting our right-of-ways and et cetera, but I also want to make sure we're not putting ordinances in place that are so restrictive that, the technology doesn't come to town, because obviously that'd be a detriment to the people here. So I appreciate the
And
answer.
this has, in fact, been run through the industry at length, and so they are expecting to work with cities with ordinances similar to this one.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Mayor Broten.
Thank you. Ms. Esparza, they seem pretty confident that this is going to, in a sense, I don't know if protect is it, but we can have our unique design wishes, whatever, to protect what we want our city to look like instead of all of a sudden they're slamming these big boxes everywhere and it looks really ugly.
Yes, and that is the point of these ordinances and the point of having an interim ordinance. The bill that has recently been amended in committee actually contained provisions that required cities to adopt small cell siting ordinances. And so, and there was a grandfathering provision in that bill which allowed cities that already had regulations in place to keep those, and we wouldn't necessarily be bound by what the legislature was telling us. So the point of bringing these forward as interims is to bring in our own design standards and make sure we can protect
what we value in terms of design, and get ahead of what the legislature was going to do. So that bill has been amended to remove the requirements for small cell siting, but that was just in committee. That doesn't mean that it can't be subsequently amended. We won't know until probably the end of the week.
Yep, end of session.
So,
and I know this is really fantastic. Our city is on the leading edge, because if the industry could, they want to dictate when they'll come, no matter where you are, how much you're allowed to charge. They will dictate that and what it would look like. So if they can get away with not having to pay any fee in our right-of-way, where we've used our revenue to procure that, and so that the neighbor isn't looking at something truly ugly, this really puts us far ahead. So I want to commend the staff and the council for being proactive on it. I know at AWC at the Action Day conference, there were very few cities that had even looked at this, especially in Eastern Washington. So this is really important. I have some questions, and I don't know if Mr. can answer these, or I'm just putting them out there. This is really good, and legal's been through it, but I had some questions about, are we going to have one designated staff member that's going to kind of oversee the different departments it's going to affect? You know, when it says administrative permits, or what was the other phrase? Concealment plans. You know, is there kind of one key person, or is it a team? It's, okay, we've got the wording, but I'm a little uneasy about how it's going to work. So that was one. I do not know what an RF certification, if that's going to be a staff member, or if we're going to have to do a new hire, or someone's going to go to school, and which department that would be in. Shot clocks, that's on page 72. The RF certification is on page 73. The administrative permit and 74 concealment plan. I tried to look through the definitions, but it wasn't quite, I don't know, in the iPad I can't turn the page as fast. I just wasn't quite finding the connection. And let's see. And then legal's prepared these, but there was wording in there about where is it? There was no appeal. And why was that going to be important? Look, just a second, I'll find it. Circled it. On page 77. And it says number 4, towards the end, it says small cell permits, administrative conditional use, concealment plan approvals, enabling permits under this chapter and our OHMC, blah, 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 is considered prudent to review process 1 and are not subject to appeal. Okay, why is just, that's a big deal, and I just wanted to check why.
So, I do not have a computer in front of me, and so
Okay.
I can't pull up 1820-230, but I assume that 1820-230 is hearing examiner. Type 1 decisions are not appealable to the hearing examiner. There's a different process.
Okay, I didn't see hearing examiner mentioned, but that was, I
If
just
you-
wasn't sure on
Sure.
that.
Mayor, it's section, Nikki,
Compliance with state processing limitations, it's the big, and it's
It-
number 4.
1107-110, number 4.
Right.
Okay.
So the type 1 review processes in the code say that they are not review, or they're not appealable unless stated in the code that they are appealable. They're administrative decisions.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just, this is great, I'm glad we've got the legal word, but how's it going to mesh with the staff that we have and the knowledge or the knowledge we don't have yet on, to make sure that it works for us? Because I know we're negotiating franchises and, you know, making sure that we stay ahead of the game so that we truly aren't losing out. Just concerned. So I don't expect all the answers, but they're not.
Well, I can respond to a couple of your questions.
Thank you.
The RF, the certification, that would be something that the carrier would be responsible for, and it would be a sworn affidavit signed by that RF specialist that would be submitted to the city.
Okay.
So I don't think we would necessarily have to have the specialist on board as long as there's a sworn affidavit available. Your other question on the shot clock, I'm not quite sure what the question was, Counselor.
On page 72, let's see, it's section 11.07.020 application, and it's under number 2, and it's C2. Any element of a deployed which qualifies as either an eligible facility request or a co-location shall be specified by design, blah, 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 comply with the shot clocks established by federal law and OHMC chapter 19.30.
That's correct. That is something that we did establish in that chapter. That was a requirement by the federal government that we process these applications within 60 days.
Okay, and that's the shot clock.
That's the
then.
shot clock.
It's a time limit. It's not
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Didn't quite get the lingo, so just trying to make sure I'm not behind the 8 ball here or whatever. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, yes, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm excited to see this. I know AWC has been following this for trying to stay ahead of it. It's been a topic they've discussed. In all the discussions I think we've had here internally and that I've seen at conferences, they talk about the space between these being 500 is a typical number I hear between small cell to small cell, up to 1,000. And we've got a couple of references in here that are, well, the first one is greater than 1,320 feet. It's on page 88. Just curious, I know this is Ogden, Murphy, Wallace. Is that the standard? Are these things able to have that kind of reach? I mean, that's their language, and I know this is interim. I'm just curious. So it's 88, page 88, item number 6 is one of the references. A distance equal to or greater than 1,320 linear feet.
I don't have a specific answer to your question. However, I did read that some of these small cells have different, I'll say, power and
Right.
options and ability to reach further than other small cells. Okay, good, Steve.
Mr. Servadius, that's actually some of our existing language, and if you'll note, that's under the heading of microfacilities, which are different than the small cells. And so this is the spacing requirement that our current code has on those cell facilities which meet the definition of microfacilities, which are actually bigger than the small cells.
So it may be in here and I missed it. Do we have a spec then for how closely these could be sited?
Not that I'm aware of in terms of our small cells, no, sir.
Okay. And we do a fairly good job of describing the design elements. Do you know, and you may not, Mr. Lefevre, but anyone that wants to chime in, has any municipality actually spec'd? You gave a very good picture, the before and after on the beach. That's a good looking pole. Some of these poles are hideous, and some are actually unobtrusive. You wouldn't know they exist. One of the early adopted ones was the Philips smart pole. If you Google Philips smart pole, it looks like a street light with a little antenna on top. It's very concealed. Can we go as far, and I understand this is interim, but with carriers, do they, and they probably have their own proprietary equipment, but could we spec, especially in certain areas, CBD, this is the only pole we want to see? Is that something that staff as we move forward, can we look into so we know exactly what we're getting and it saves you and planning or development services time sorting through an application? Are we able to spec, these are the 3 types of poles we'll accept in our city? Thoughts?
I'll start it out, Nikki, if you can follow me up, but I would certainly think that that's an opportunity that we could have, especially in those 3 zones that we specified the need for a concealment plan. If we had specific standards or specific designs that we wanted a carrier to follow, it would actually make their job easier if they would, and I think the pushback would be making sure that that pole was able to, handle their technology and their equipment.
Right.
But yes, I think that would be an option that would be available to us.
Okay. And I am excited to see this coming forward. As Ms. Munn said, we're trying to get in front of this. I'm just concerned about the number. If each carrier, we don't know this for certain, but if they require their own pole for their microcell, I don't know how many of these we could get on a pole, but this is potentially a lot of new equipment showing up in town and around town. And
Potentially.
if it's in pedestrian areas, it's one thing if you're flying down the highway, you don't notice it, but if it has to pop up, and the purpose of this is in denser pedestrian areas, I would hope that we have a whole bunch of say over what these look like. So I will support this right now. I just want to please stay on top of this.
Yes.
And specifically see to what degree we can spec the specific pole that would get installed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other council questions or input? So you are recommending one motion to approve all 3, it looks like.
Yes.
How does council wish?
3 separate motions.
Oh, really?
Oh, I take that back.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Councilor Watsinger.
Okay, I move to adopt interim ordinance number 1830, establishing a permit process for small cell deployment.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second to adopt interim ordinance number 1830, establishing a permit process for small cell deployment. Motion by Wassinger, second by Servadius. No other questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Councilor Wassinger.
Sure. I move to adopt interim ordinance number 1831, establishing development standards for small cell deployments.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to adopt interim ordinance number 1831, establishing development standards for small cell deployment, and that's a motion by Wassinger, second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. One left. Who wants to take it on? Councilor Wassinger, 3 for 3.
I move to adopt ordinance number 1832, adding small cell deployment definitions.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to adopt ordinance number 1832, adding small cell deployment definitions. Motion by Watsinger, second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that also passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre.
Thank you, Council.
So we will now go on to our last resolution for the evening, and that is number 1802, security cameras policy. We've got our city attorney, Nikki Esparza, birthday lady.
Well, this evening I have the pleasure of presenting Resolution 1802, which addresses security camera policies. Council has been very clear that there was interest in deploying cameras in our parks to protect our assets, in particular, of course, the beautiful jewel that we're creating down at Windjammer. And staff, of course, has heard you loud and clear. And so at this juncture, we are interested in deploying security cameras, specifically in our parks at this point, in order to deter crime and protect our assets. So Resolution 1802 asks for your approval of a security camera policy, which does balance our interest in deterring crime and protecting assets with the public's right to privacy. So it does address things like not aiming cameras directly into people's homes and only covering areas that are public access. And it talks about how we will retain the footage that we collect, and it talks about how we will implement this program, who's responsible, talks about training. And I'm sure that you all have had the opportunity to read it, and so I won't go into a great deal of detail on everything, but I am happy to take questions if you have them.
Okay, before we do that, we'll ask if anyone from the public would like to come forward. Okay, seeing none. Council, questions? Motions, input? Mr. Larson, Councilor Larson.
It looks very clear. That doesn't delineate where we're going to have those, but I imagine that that's something that we're going to work on down the line. And if there are no other questions or issues, I recommend that we adopt Resolution 1802, Security Camera Policy, as presented.
Second.
Okay, got a motion second, a couple seconds, to adopt Resolution 1802 as presented. Motion by Larson, second by Almberg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we are going on to contracts and agreements, and we have Commercial Electric Facilities Contract, Puget Sound Energy, Commercial Line Extension Agreement, Amendment, Clean Water Facility. And we've got Brett Arvidsson, City Engineer.
Good evening. This is a continuation of something that we did previously. Our clean water facility does require a substantial growth in electrical capacity. On March 7th, 2017, City Council did approve a contract with PSE for a new industrial service. That was the amount of about $337,000. This did two things. One, it provided service into the site, undergrounding the new transformers and stuff for that. The second thing it did was upgrade the PSE system between City Beach and the plant, along City Beach and plant from Barrington down there. Our plant capacity was large enough that their single feeder was not enough, so they had to feed us from two locations. This was based on an assumption of obtaining an easement along a property. We had a property in development that we had a requirement for a public utility easement for that. But unfortunately, that property did not develop, so we were without an easement. So we had to start looking at other arrangements. I'm going to skip one here. This is the two sites that we're talking about. So the red line there is the original alignment, and the green line is what we'll be talking about. I'll come back to this in a minute. So we got in conversation with PSC, and the first thing we thought about was running underground service down City Beach underneath the road. There's a very tight right-of-way there. And that was quite expensive. Just the undergrounding was about $250,000, and we still have to put the wires in. PSC did gave us an option for actually, we had, and when we built Pioneer Way, we'd actually installed a power conduit all the way down the way, and that was actually not in use at this point. So they gave us an option for actually running that, just putting that line in. It's more expensive than our original contract, but it actually gave us an underground service, and it at that point became a lot more cost-effective for us. Where am I here? So anyway, we got in touch with them, and that seemed like the best way to go. This item was brought up at a workshop, and you heard the amount of $75,000. That was the original estimate from PSC. The final amount is $119,000. The reason it grew was twofold. One is the original estimate was just the basic service, and talking to PSC, this would require a lot of work on Pioneer and be an impact to the businesses. So I asked them to add a premium for doing it during off hours. It's about $30,000, so they would not impact the businesses there. That could come down if we can do it during the day, during some of the activities during the day, but right now we're assuming that we would not be there except in the evenings. The other cost on it was they added some contingency to the contract. The question came up that why don't we underground the whole thing? And we'd actually looked at that originally when we did the original evaluations of these routes. And unfortunately, that power line, there's 3 poles between Pioneer and our treatment plant. And unfortunately, those power poles serve a lot of different things. So for us to underground those things, we have, one, the cost of undergrounding it, but we have to go across and pick up some transformers on the other side, service some properties to the east. So we'd be undergrounding quite a bit more. So PSC's, and also be installing a lot more transformers. So PSC's initial blush on that one was $200,000 to $300,000 on their cost. And we'd probably be seeing $200,000 to $300,000 in undergrounding it. So it was very expensive, and so that's why we didn't pursue it in the first place. Also, I would be concerned about it if we ever want to come back and modify the intersection. It's something we've talked about in the past. These things could be in the way, we'd have to move them again. So that would be something we want to do when we do the intersection. Also, the other thing on that was we'd also have to obtain several easements, and it's pretty tight there. So it was a tough place to put wires. Like I say, when we first started talking to them 2 years ago, I'd asked for an underground option, and it got very expensive very quickly. So anyway, at this point, we feel the option of bringing the line down from Ireland down Pioneer is the most cost-effective for the city. PSC would increase their cost by $119,000, and we feel this is the best way to go at this time. This is actually part of the work. This has actually been built. We actually undergrounded the facility in there, and that system's actually heating up at the end of this month. So anyway, our recommended action is authorize the mayor to sign the amended service agreement with PSC in the amount of $456,615.55, which increases our contract by $119,171.15. Questions?
Okay, I'll first ask the public if anybody here has any out in the public. Okay. Council? Councilor Olmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Brett, I have a question regarding the permanent and temporary service charges that are not included in your line items.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you know I'm sure you don't know the exact amount because some of them are variable depending on what you run into.
Mm-hmm.
What is your estimate for the non-included items right now? 'Cause some of these items amount to a fair amount of money.
Are you talking like the excavation and those type of things?
Well, yeah, you've got the single wire run and a handhold and a transformer, each additional run of wire circuit, each additional trip beyond it, and that's just, those are trips going in there, $360.89 per trip. Hourly rate for additional engineering, underground, temporary. So what's you have any contingency in this thing?
That's the 15%, so that's one reason the cost came up. So they did put some contingency in there. Also, some of those costs are related to our, remember, this is, the original contract covered, as I showed back in this, this slide right here, involved bringing the wires into the site, all the metering and all that type of work. This contract amends that contract. That work is actually underway right now. So right now our costs are looking pretty good on that one.
Well, help me out with this contingency. Where is the contingency posted?
They don't post it. That's just built into their contract. PSC.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. PSC has a very, cumbersome way of doing their contracts. It's very hard for it. And so that's the discussion I had with the engineer. So they don't give you an itemized list.
But some of these are refundable.
Yeah, some of the refundable, but that's if somebody else hooks up to the transformers.
So you can't put your finger on a most likely maximum number right now.
Most likely maximum number is what they're estimating.
The
That's-
450, 615?
Right, that's a not to exceed number, and it's a time and materials to that number.
That is a not to exceed, and but that's not included in the other items down below.
Yeah.
So you have me confused on something here.
Okay,
You say they've included the contingency in their number, and it shouldn't exceed $456,516, but when I read this for the permanent temporary service charges that are not included in your line extension, there's additional money. So I don't see how that is a contingency.
I will have to get back to
It
you on
says
that.
any applicable charges
Sure.
listed below will be billed after your service line installation. Base costs include Schedule 87 tax and our current cost effective January 26, 2018. These charges also do not include permitting fees or trenching or other excavation-related work that is your responsibility.
Yeah, and the trenching is already been done, is completed.
Okay.
Yeah, we did that a long time ago.
I'm just trying to connect
Yeah.
these so-called ancillary charges to the not to exceed that you just said of 456,000.
Could you refer me to the,
On there.
or not included, yeah. Yeah, I see it here. Excuse me. Yeah, it's this one here, right? I see it. I think this relates more to when you run these services, you have multiple users on it. We're a single user. This is more to do with if we have to run extra handholds or extra wires or extra services on that. It wasn't really something we discussed in the cost estimate.
Well, that's kind of what bothers me. If you
Yeah.
didn't discuss it, it's on a contract that we're being asked to approve and for the mayor to sign. Shouldn't we know what that really means?
We can come back if you'd like.
I got to tell you, I'm not comfortable with it because I don't see how a contingency is worked in here to cover those kinds of things. You know, if it was a contract I had to sign on the private side, I wouldn't sign it without understanding it.
I will get back then.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. So just to restate that, so I'm clear, I think what Councilmember Allenberg is asking, if there's a 15% contingency, is it included in those charges, correct? Or it's not included is what we're wondering about? Is that what you're asking
Well,
exactly?
Brett said that there's 15% charge, 15% contingency worked into PSE numbers
Right.
that they do not identify. But then in addition to that, they have other services on this same contract with a line for the customer to initial. So I don't see where there's a contingency in this, and I don't think that we understand, at least I don't understand, how the contingency, so-called contingency works and with the other services that are included in the bottom portion of that agreement. They'd have that in there, they have it there for a specific reason.
I think this is there's oftentimes when you have the two services come together, there's oftentimes metering and stuff like that that occurs, and it's usually outside their estimate. Again, I need to.
I'm looking for, how much do we think this is really going to cost? And you say that it doesn't exceed $456,000, and that's not necessarily what you said, also with the contingency and also with the other line items that are additional charges.
What PSC chart does is estimate their cost of construction through their standard methodology and pull together a cost. At that point, they added 15% contingency. Now, did that cost estimate include these exemptions? I don't think so. I did not see an itemized estimate of what they do. It's all on their Schedule 75, and it's a time and materials basis.
And, you know, I want this job to move along, and this line extension is important right now. But as I said earlier, I wouldn't sign this without really understanding it, and I'm not getting the message that you really understand it.
I'd have to say that I have to go back and look at it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Brett.
Thank you, and I just want to clarify, that was listening to Council Member Almberg. I wanted to clarify that too, if we can get a better handle on the complete package. I want to question, if we could bring probably back up 2 slides, please, to the old route, new route. Perfect, thank you. This is something I asked in the February 15th workshop. There was some confusion at that point as to where the underground line was at the intersection of City Beach and Pioneer. And we now know that it is going at an angle. It's that green line running, that's the conduit that's in the road. Okay. In 2016, we as a council agreed to underground utilities on City Beach Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the February 15th workshop, I asked Mr. Stillwell, I don't know if he's back there, if we could get an idea of what it would cost. Right now, we're going to run underground, pop out of the ground next to Wells Fargo, run 50 feet overhead. I don't know, how far is it?
It's probably more closer to 200.
To 100?
200.
200, it's that far. Okay, so we run across a couple of light poles and then dive back underground. My question was, if we need to do any work on City Beach Street, and at that time he thought the only work we would be doing would be south of the Bayshore intersection. And maybe that's in the works. I don't know if he's working on those estimates, is what it would cost to underground it.
Yeah, I gave, I did explore that with PSC, and their charge on just a quick estimate was $200,000 to $300,000 just on their side. And additionally, we would be paying the excavation and digging costs, and we estimated that about $300,000.
Okay, I wasn't sure when you were talking, and you talked about if we had to renovate the intersection, so that, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was saying there is we'd be paying this money, and I was concerned that if we come back to do any work in the intersection in the future, that work may be relocated again, so that was...
So right now...
Yeah, that's just for those 3 poles, it's very expensive.
That is your estimate, that's staggering.
It's, like I say, I was surprised at it too, but those 3 poles there are just 3 poles, but they actually kind of spider web out to a whole bunch of area out there. So we have to be running underground to a whole bunch of transformers out there. And there's also, their concern was it's very tight in there, so we have to obtain easements from properties there. So they said it was a very expensive endeavor.
So in the packet you list on February 15th, 2016, when we approved, I'd have to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
It was only 81, I'm going to round up, sorry, it's 82,000 when we undergrounded the rest of City Beach. How far did we go on City Beach at that point?
In 2015, we went from Wells Fargo, that pole there, all the way down to the park, or to the parking lot at the park. So it was almost 450 feet.
So 450 feet was 82,000.
That's right.
And now 200 feet is to 300,000?
there's two things going on. One, it was a Schedule 74, so we had a cost share on that. That's where we should explore. The other thing that was very expensive is we didn't have any transformers on there, and that's where the cost becomes, is putting the pads in and putting the wires in. And we also, you have to remember, we paid $220,000 for, we just paid PSC $83,000. We paid $220,000 for the excavation and installing the pipe.
At that time?
Yeah, at that
In
time.
2016. Okay, I mean, I don't know if any of my peers want to weigh in on this. Just, I'm hard pressed to, I'd like to get as much of this stuff underground as possible while still being responsible with the costs. It just seems odd. Are there any other things on those poles right there at Wells Fargo?
That's the problem is, if you look at those poles, there's an arm sticking out with 3 wires going every which way, and it's serving that commercial property in the back. It's also a connector for the grid there, so there's kind of things going every which way there. So that's what, in their point of view, it's a tough place to underground because they just have a lot of connections in there. So we, like I say, we'd have to start running conduits and connecting things back a ways.
Okay.
So it's just not just that one section, it's also having to connect in either direction.
All right, thank you. I wasn't sure when you were talking about renovating the intersection, if that's what those costs were for.
No.
Maybe someday when we redo the intersection, we could
Yeah,
make
like I
it look
say,
better.
my concern was if we'd spend all this money now and we come back and change the intersection, also we got to transfer in the way and we're moving everything in the future.
All right, thank you. And so time sensitivity on this, you're able to get some clarification for Mr. Allenberg's question, and then we can take another look at this?
Yeah, we can do it the next session. I apologize for not having the answers. The system, like I said earlier, is being heated up. We have enough capacity with the single service coming in right now to keep working on it. Where we get to the need is where it takes, when to start putting load on it, and we start running all the equipment at the same time, which will be later in the summer.
Okay.
So I think we can handle moving it off to the 20th.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions at this point? Councilor Allenberg?
If I could for just a moment, Brett. I'm not trying to be an obstructionist
No.
in this, okay?
No, I apologize.
We stubbed our toe not asking how
Yeah,
much before. I don't intend to do it again, and I kind of feel that the council members feel the same way about that too. When there's a money explanation, we should all understand it.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
And I felt, I personally was having some difficulty getting the numbers. I asked them for a breakdown of cost, and so I could understand it better, and it wasn't something they really gave us, and I was struggling with some of the descriptions in the system too. So part of my struggle was their system is pretty rigid.
They have an answer, though. I know they do, because they want to get paid, and
No,
they're a partner in the community.
They are.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to say, PSC has been excellent to work with on this, and I want to clarify it. And they were frustrated too because they were having a new system issue, and so I was trying to get some of this stuff into the contract. So I knew you were interested in seeing the breakdown. I just couldn't get it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes.
Comment. As we talk about costs, this is not in addition to the cost estimate that we talked about yesterday. Okay, it's already included in that, so I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions at this point? I guess then we'll just not take action on that and move on to the last item on our agenda, which is an executive session based on RCW 4230, 110, regarding potential litigation. So I think about 15 minutes. We don't intend to make any decisions, and we'll probably end up coming back and adjourning in 15 minutes. So, okay.
You're right.
Mm-hmm, it sure was. Okay, I think at this time, we'll call the meeting, March 6th meeting back to order, regular city council meeting. And we take no action in executive session. And so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Yes, oh, Mayor. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.